All right, well, good morning. My name is Tom Trusser. I call myself a civic educator and public defender. I'm a longtime activist in the city of Chicago, but I started here as an actor in 1980 as a Shakespearean actor, and then created a Shakespeare company and managed a theater company um, called Pegasus Players. So for a while, I was probably one of the most successful non-equity theater producers in the city's history. I have a long abiding interest in the connections between the arts and social change and economic development and social change. I have a master's degree in urban development, specifically so that I could be a connector between Chicago's arts and culture sectors, and it's also very vibrant community organizers and community development sectors. So Chicago has a huge history in both spaces. We have great creators and artists and visual artists and writers and so forth, musicians, of course, going to our history. But we also have a long history of organizing, placemaking, fighters, people fighting for justice and trying to improve their communities. And sometimes these two spaces overlap and intersect. And I spent a lot of years trying to figure out a way to join them. So this presentation is called How Did the Arts Build Communities? It reflects my experience at a place called People's Housing, which is in the northwestern part of the eastern part of the city along the lakefront in West Rogers Park. All right. So as I say, my background is a former actor, theater producer, community organizer, and educator, but I was also an internet startup marketer for OurHouse.com, which was Ace Hardware's online play for a brief, glorious year and a half in the early part of the 21st century. And let's just say Our House burned through $150 million. And all I have to show for it is this t-shirt. My civic background includes fights to keep Lincoln Park public, being one of the leaders of No Game Chicago, and we defeated the city's bid to help host the 2016 Olympics, which is a story for another day. I actually was the Green Party candidate for Cook County Board President, a little known fact, in 2010, and ran against, unsuccessfully, Toni Preckwinkle. I got 56,000 votes, she got 940,000. But it was an instructive experience. In 2012, I started planning something called the Civic Lab and opened it in the firehouse, first floor of this firehouse that you can see over here. In 2013, it was Chicago's and America's first co-working space devoted to civic engagement and social change. In 2016, I published a book called Chicago is Not Broke, Funding the City We Deserve. The Civic Lab, just as an aside, because you are talking about making space, is something I'm very, very familiar with and believe passionately in. Space making is critical for social justice and social change and for the creative process. And we pay far little attention to the physical spaces for these kinds of endeavors. Now, we know a lot about building a theater. There are many theaters, obviously, in the city of Chicago. There are many galleries. But these are operated for specific organizations, and they don't really have a community-facing vibe to them often. I would say 99% of them. Certainly, there are community vibes for some arts spaces, but the idea of making a space for community creativity and learning, sort of like a mashup between a library, a gym, a community center, a kitchen, it's something we desperately need, I think, in Chicago and in America. And the Civic Lab was that sort of space with an emphasis on justice and the art and the information and research. But we had a terrestrial radio station at the Civic Lab. We had a fully equipped media center with a green screen studio. We had a physical shop where we could build things. So we were making things, as well as designing things, as well as hosting many meetings and parties, and we had a full kitchen. So this idea of space for creativity and community building is something I'm very familiar with and really supportive of. In 2017, I launched something called the Power Institute with my colleague, Jonathan Peck. This is a space for training and learning for civic power. So it's people organized to win, engage, and resist. We do quite a few trainings and workshops called Chicago 101, Community Organizing 101, Grassroots Campaigning 101, and Chicago Budget 101, and a lot more. All right, to the point. Community development, what is it? We're talking about nonprofit focused community development. We're not talking about for-profit community development, but these are grassroots efforts to improve their communities, and they're usually focused on building something, fixing something up. So maybe there's a vacant lot that needs to be made unvacant. Maybe there's an old crappy building that was abandoned. Maybe it's a crack house. Maybe it's been seized by the city because of back due taxes. But community development folks usually are trying to wrestle with those places and spaces and bring them back online for the use of the community, usually in low-income areas. It's usually a 501c3 that does this, and they're called community development corporations. And there are quite a few of them in the city of Chicago. The first one was in Bedford-Stuyvesant, set up in 1967. And since the late 70s, about 40 Chicago CDCs have developed 15,000 units of affordable housing. And nationwide, it's over 500,000 units of affordable housing. So it's something that you might say the government should be doing, you know, of building affordable housing, but they haven't. And so these nonprofits have stepped up into that space. Now, where I come involved is that People's Housing, which was one of Chicago's preeminent such examples of the CDC, hired me in 1993 to bring arts into their toolbox. As I say, they were ensconced in the North Rogers Park community, and at that time, they already had 10 buildings with 600 very low-income people living in them. So this People's Housing essentially bought these built properties, fixed them up, renovated them, often gutting them and making them habitable and then moving people in. But what happened was they purchased the Howard Theater, which had been built in 1917 and had been vacant for about 20 years. That is to say, it was boarded up. You can see it's a typical Chicago theater type of structure with the storefronts along the first floor, which were occupied at the time by small businesses. And then the lobby, the marquee running through the midsection of the building, the theater space being sort of the large volume. And then on either side of the theater space, you'd see 2 floors of rentals, which were sometimes offices and apartments. And People's Housing had rehabbed all those spaces, and they were low-income housing units. But the theater space was unused, and I was hired to bring it back to life and to create programming for the people of North Rogers Park. And People's Housing had been founded in 1979, and you can see their mission statement. They were feisty, somewhat oppositional to the city powers, very rooted in the community with community members on their board. And as I say, they were already, by 1993, very established with a staff of 30 and a budget of over $3 million. This is our service area, as you can see, hugging the lake. And we were up here. That red dot is the Howard Street red line, and our building was right there. So we are at the very north end of the city. That's our primary service area, as I said, at the time, what we called Howard Street and north of Howard. The demographics of that particular community at the time were about, you know, a little under 50% African American, and then kind of almost evenly split between white and Latinx. So it's kind of a, you know, at the time, and it remains a very racially diverse area. However, the median income was very low, $18,000, which was, you know, considered, you know, poverty level wages for a family of 3. Primary services of People's Housing was to develop, rehab, and manage the properties. They did community organizing. So they were fixing up a local park, trying to get crime out of it. They had organized elections for the local elementary school. So they're involved in many things around the community. So here's the kind of things they did. They're rehabbing properties, 21 properties with children and families. They had development brought in $22 million in capital. So these are jobs, you know, for the construction. And as I say, for the staff of managing those properties, these were people of color who were the property managers and so forth. And then here's the Howard Theater, as I say, located right on Howard Street. So there's a little bit about the Howard Theater. You can see from the highlights from the that old flyer to this black and white picture, you know, from the mid 70s. But by the time I got there, it was not in service. Now here's the blueprint. And this is where you start to get creative. The main theater space was closed off and unsafe. It was ratty and full of water. However, the lobby here is 4,000 square feet. And so what I did is I put a stage, I built a stage right here, right up against the doors, and put a heater in, so we heated the space, and put a little microphone over the stage, so anything happening on the stage would be heard by people on the street. So immediately it was a magnet for kids who were pressing their faces up against the glass to see what was happening as we started a program. We had very little money, but we had a lot of imagination, and I'm sure you can think of other items, ways to get your place out equipped or get spaces equipped. We did Spare a Chair Day and used our grassroots crew to flyer, and we got 100 chairs donated. So it was a whole big operation. We had volunteers washing the chairs. We had volunteers logging the chairs in. We labeled every chair with the name of the donor. So, like when you go to the opera, or whatever, you see the chair with a guy's name on it, because he probably gave him $5,000. Well, you could have your name on a chair too. And all you had to do is drop a chair off. And it was a great spirit. We had a barbecue going. So it's like fun, mixing it up, but, and people also donated other things besides chairs, like a desk, file cabinets, and things like that. We followed the model of community capacity building, which I think is relevant for your work. Started by Dr. John Kretzman and John McKnight of Northwestern University. They're now at DePaul, the Asset-Based Community Development Institute. So it's the term called asset-based development. In a nutshell, this framework is used by organizers around the world, but it takes your community and looks at it for its positives and for its assets, as opposed to a place reposing of problems. So oftentimes people say, hey, my community is full of problems. There's unemployment, there's vacant lots, there's drugs, there's this, there's that. And it implies that if the community has problems, the people there are problematic. And it's a negative way of looking at things. And our approach was the opposite. So we were saying, what treasures, if you want to put it that way, what treasures do our community have that we want to find and map and inventory and use them for our burgeoning new community arts program? So we say each community is rich with a wide range of assets. These things are already there, but they need to be recognized, cataloged, and thought of as being capable of using for the community's own improvement. So this is an example of the kinds of things that you would see in an assets-based approach. You say that there's a physical space of your community. What does it have? And parks, lots, buildings, these are the things that they have. The local economy, the businesses, the associations that are there. That is to say, they're invisible, but they're still important assets. So there's lots of organizations that are formal and informal. And the institutions, obviously, schools, libraries, hospitals, the police, and of course your individuals. The people themselves are repositories of great, great treasure and skill. And we went on a treasure hunt to find them. We did a grassroots survey, and this is what I was just talking about just 2 seconds ago with Diana about asking the neighbors, what do you have, what do you need, and what do you want, and what can you share? We did a 2-page survey designed partly by our own residents, and I hired 10 teams of 2 people each to administer the survey in face-to-face encounters. We did 1,000 encounters over 2 weeks, which is like 3% of all the people who live in our community. And essentially it's a 2-page survey. The first part said, hey, hello, we're People's Housing Community Arts. We're considering doing something with the old Howard Theater that might have programming in it, like theater, like dance, blah, blah, blah. What of that would interest you? Would you like dance? Would you like theater? Would you like puppet shows? What time would you come? What days would you come? And would you pay $1, $2, $5, $10, you know, that kind of thing. The second page was really where the payoff was. We got people thinking about this, and then we said, well, what about you? How creative are you? And initially, most people, when they saw that part of the survey, go, oh, I'm not creative. You know, because they were thinking about the traditional arts in response to the survey. Like, you know, we're going to have theater and we're going to have dancers in the theater. We're going to have a puppet show in the theater, this kind of thing. So originally they said, well, I don't do that stuff. But then we had 37 prompts on this survey. And we said that the survey givers were instructed to coach the respondent by saying, yeah, I know, but just look at this list. And just, let me check off anything that you can do. And so this list included things like, I can sing, I can cook, I can do magic tricks, I can make parties, I can sew. You get my grift. I can write. I am good with my hands. You know, I can build things. So like 37 of those. And on average, the person in our community, remember, it's African American, half and half, half African American, one half Latino, one half white, very low income. The average person checked off 7 things. And then we said, well, that's great. Would you like to teach any of those things? So you say you like them and maybe you're really good at them. Would you like to teach them? If so, what? And then the last thing was, well, would you like to take classes in any of those things? So if you like sewing, and that's a strong point, would you like us to bring in like a master sewer? You know, and would you come and take a class from such a person? And then we got all that information. And lastly, we asked for their contact information. So that when these things started happening, we could reach back out to the people and go, hey, remember us? You said you were interested in sewing. Guess what? We now have a jewelry making class. I went to a Catholic school that was closing down, and I grabbed these funky chairs. I paid for a van, and we loaded up the chair with these funky bright chairs, came out of their dining room. And above the theater was a large open space, like a ballroom, that we inherited. And we used that very widely for dances, rentals, and classes. We had also a big space in the main building of People's Housing that was just unfinished. We turned that into a community art studio. So we bought a kiln and we outfitted it, and I found an artist to become our tile maker. But you can see we used the front of the theater imaginatively with setups and tables. And we had a nearby vacant lot that we just colonized and did all kinds of things on the vacant lot, including the first farmers market of the community, which is another great activity for you to consider. But to get to the place where we had actually users and helpers, I spent about a year just running around the place, as Diana was saying that you had done and may still be doing. I had a model of the theater, and I set it up in the park, in the street, in front of the theater. When there was a block party, I would be there. I would go to community meetings, and people were like tired of seeing me coming with that friggin' cardboard model. Oh, here's Tom again. He's going to harangue us about the theater. And that's how I got dozens and dozens and dozens of volunteers, people who would basically are passing by that space every day, but without any kind of aggressive outreach, they're not going to know what's happening. So placing myself out there in the community aggressively and creatively, repeatedly, and then training others to do so is really the thing that turned this thing alive. And you can see what the mention, here's that wooden stage set up against the glass doors of the theater. Right here you see that picture is from our community arts fest, the Howard Street Drumming Festival. That was a day long, it was a day of drumming, one drumming act followed another from the ethnic groups that were along Howard Street. So there are African American drummers, Latino drummers, Caribbean drummers, and so you can see here's a guy doing the limbo under a fire stick because the Caribbean community was very active on Howard Street. So everybody came and participated and mixed it up on that day of the Howard Street Drumming Festival. The Howard Street arts program grew to a staff of 7 with a total budget of $225,000. We served about 12,000 people a year. We had stories in the local radios, newspapers, etc. These are the source of the funds. the Chicago Community Trust, MacArthur Foundation, City Arts, the Arts Council, and unique to us, the Local Initiative Support Corporation. So LISC is a national funder of community development. They'd never given money to the arts before, but we made the case that People's Housing, as a bona fide community development organization, well recognized in that space, was now a producer of cultural programming and deserved funding for that reason. And so I was able to make the case successfully to arts funders who never gave money to housing or community organizing that this was a proper thing. And I made the case to housing funders that never cared for the arts to say, you all should care about this because it is part and parcel of how we build successful communities. So here's kind of how the flow went. Artists would come to me, either I would find them or they just walked into the front door saying, hey, I could do jewelry making. Hey, I teach weightlifting, all kinds of things. We agreed on the project to say, okay, jewelry person, I'm gonna give you 3 mornings. I'm gonna give you a budget of $200. And you can pay yourself out of that and you can buy and make yourself some budget for materials. We'll produce the flyers. You have to send half of them, take half of them and distribute them, and we'll distribute the other half. And it was a test to see, you know, could this person who wanted to work with us, could they teach? Could they work successfully with people? Did they know their shit? Were they good marketers, you know, good talkers? And we would do our share and we would do their share. And there was kind of no harm, no foul. If the jewelry person showed up and had a bunch of people in tow and they did a good job, then we would institutionalize it, we would raise money, and that would become a permanent feature. We would give them space. We would start selling their jewelry in our other events. But if it just so happened that the person just wasn't very good at it and it, you know, the classes didn't go well, all right, we're down $200. You know what I mean? It was a low risk for everybody. But more often than not, these experiments paid off. So after the trial run, we would do a go or no go. And if the project had merit, then I was committed to this artist practitioner, even if they didn't really have any credentials as a teacher. I was trusting and investing in their abilities, and oftentimes we would get them further training, you know, if they wanted to, and then we would lead to actual micro enterprise. So this was not all the projects, but I'd say 1/5 of all the projects we started actually led to businesses being created and operated over time, where money was being produced and not given to the People's Housing, but directly shared amongst the young people who are doing the making. It was very powerful. Here's examples of the things that we created. Again, just from this mantra. One was the all ages open mic. So here's an artist that came to me. His name is Obo William King. He's in the storytelling business to this day, but he just happened to move into the community. I happened to know him. He walked into our space. We reconnected. He said he was interested in all ages open mic, and we just did it with, you know, on his say so. I got people to donate us all the equipment, mics, mixers, mic stands, all donated within a month. And in January of 1995, it was freezing cold. I packed our little theater with all ages, people young and old, getting up and performing. And originally, it was once a month, but the young people were so happy to see this there, they begged us to increase it, and eventually it was every week. And it was the crux for a lot of things that would happen here. And you can see some of the performers. This woman here, we call her C. She came in rapping to other people's tunes, and she was obviously schooled in popular music. We encouraged her to write her own songs, to write her raps, and she came in the second week with original poetry, and she turned out to be very, very adept. But originally, without our coaching or prompting, she would have been happy to just sort of rap to, you know, the extant tape or somebody else's, you know, song that was already out there. This just shows you, there's the young kids. Now, these shorties over here became our crew. They weren't interested in performing, but they were interested in the gear. So this, again, is using the opportunity to unleash learning. We train them in how to lay down the cable, how to set up, when the performers would come, you can see they're like literally they're 12 years old, but they got this stuff instantly. And when the performers would come, they would just give these young men their tapes or whatever materials queued up, and the young men would know what to do with them, and then the act could proceed. And what the point we were making is, you know, in the world of performing arts, there's a lot more jobs off stage than on stage. And that proved to be very, very powerful. And you can see what happened is it turned out to be a gateway. We recruited a young woman who was a reporter to start a writing class. So the young people that were coming into the All Ages Open Mic who were interested in words, we recruited them to the writing class, and they met once a week or sometimes twice a week. And then from there, we created a newspaper called The Word. And again, that was a People's Housing Funded venture, and we would pay the young people to write columns for the paper, including sports, music reviews, interviews, etc. But in order to be in the team, they had to take the writing class. So we're being a little cagey. You know, you want to be a paid staff member of The Word, you have to spend a month in the writing class. But the All Ages Open Mic also led to a talent show where we paid cash money for the first prizes and second prizes. That led to a cable TV show and a record album. Believe it or not, we actually recorded our own album completely from the talent along Howard Street. So a guy had his own recording equipment, and all the people on the album were from the talent shows. So the young kids to the old elders were all on this album. Here's the first, as I mentioned, the drums of Rogers Park barbecue. You can see some of the acts that were on stage that night. You know, American Indians, Kodo drummers, steel drummers, African eccentric dancing, all happened on the same stage. At the end of the evening, we brought out instruments and noisemakers and passed them out to the audience. All the artists came back on stage, and it was a massive drumming festival from all the different cultures, all drumming at once. And it was a beautiful musical metaphor for, you know, for these things. It was just amazing. Then we got a bunch of drummers that I met in the park to join us, and they were really great drummers, and they did a free show in the front of the theater, and that led to a drumming class that produced an ensemble that I got to paid work at Navy Pier. So 3 of these men, these older men who were part of that ensemble, with 3 of the young kids who were their mentors and trainees, together they performed all summer and made, I would have to say, pretty good money down at Navy Pier. Here's the Tile People. As I mentioned, we got Kay is her name. She created this company, we call it the Tile People. She trained young people and young adults in the art of making and installing tile. This installation right here is at Loyola University, and you can see it today at the Lewis Center. This guy right here, you can't tell, but he's actually the president of Loyola at the time. So again, that was a paid gig. This is the album I mentioned. It was actually a tape called The Best of Howard Street Volume 1. And you can see some of the performers. That's Gregory. He's the guy that was the producer. All this gear was in his house. These are the 2 youngest, Kentisha and LaQuanta, the 2 youngest performers on the album. And there's the oldest one, Mrs. Jones, and Oba, my producer, the guy who was the sort of the MC. But she walked into the All Ages Open Mic one day and just took to the stage and said, "You all got to hear real music." And she belted out "God Bless the Children," as if it was all of a sudden we were hearing Billie Holiday had just come into the house. And everyone was dumbstruck. And so she has 2 numbers on that album. One of the guys that was performing for us was a young man named Malik Youssef, who came in and started performing with us regularly. We gave him one of his first breaks. He ended up winning 2 Grammys and has worked regularly with people like Kanye West and major names in the entertainment industry. But he performed with us regularly back in 1994, 1995, and he has 2 tracks on the Best of Howard Street. Called one of them is called Hollywood Jerome, which he actually turned into a short movie. All right, here's where our operating principles were. That comes from the world of organizing. You start where the people are. You always have to start where they are. You seduce, recruit, and employ local artists. So there may be many walking past in your area all the time, and you may know them already. You leverage your mastery of space. So People's Housing was a master of space, and we really leveraged that for this program. We listened, we learned, and we led. And I think that sounds very much in line with your own philosophy. And we used some seed funding, but not a lot, to jumpstart these programs very quickly. And we got known for like a place that you can come and get your idea embraced and implemented very fast. I mean, like within a week. And that really, I think, gave us a lot of chops in the community. So ideas for consideration. When you ask, how can artists accelerate and assist community development and community organizing? I think, and I'm just going to say what you probably already know and live, artists bring new ways of thinking and doing. So we know communities have problems, but they also have opportunities. And we say artists can bring a lot of their good creative powers to these solutions and these issues. And that's an asset. Artists practice collaboration and team building. And that may be a kind of a trite saying, but in the world of community building, it's actually a very needed skill. And what I found at People's Housing was originally I was the outsider. I mean, besides being white, I was an arts maker, and these seasoned community developers were saying, Tom, you're a nice guy and all, but what actually are you doing here? We are hard-ass community builders. We deal with buildings, and we have budgets of $3 million, $5 million. You like make little plays. After a year and a half, I was kind of running the place. People saw how powerful this work was, that everybody wanted to be in my camp. Everybody wanted to come to the theater and do their programming at the theater because it was a place of joy and celebration and a magnet for the community. So when we put on an event, people would come, and the other members of the staff would come and set up their table, like to sell their goods, like to peddle their homes, like say, hey, we have a new house opening up, a new apartment building opening up on Morse Avenue. They would use that opportunity to market and ride our slipstream. At the time of People's Housing's closing, sadly, in 1995, on the books was our next project, a 30-unit, $8 million project called the Duke Ellington Arms. And we were going to get funding from the Black Musicians Union, and we were going to use our artists to renovate and decorate and to build furniture. And we had 5 pianos donated to People's Housing that were going to be placed throughout this building. We were going to actually have a musician to be actually in residence in this building to teach the residents music and to celebrate. And it was unprecedented that the arts were so integrated into the mission of People's Housing. Sadly, that project never happened, as I say, because the building, People's Housing collapsed at the end of 1995. Finally, I say to you that artists create something from nothing and have vision to produce beauty where none is obvious. And again, many of our communities have this bad rap of being, they're kind of downtrodden, and there's dirt and there's this and that. Again, a place of problems. And we see opportunities oftentimes where people don't. How do the arts expand economic development? This is going to leave you with this last thing. Arts programs contribute to public safety, trust, and civic cohesion. So, it sounds small, but I mean, if people don't want to come out of their homes, you really can't do anything. You can't organize squat. You can't have a bake sale if nobody's going to come to your bake sale. And having these events increase safety. and increase people's sense of like the possible. Doing the arts builds multiple intelligences and develops collaborative and leadership skills. Everyone who came out and did work with us was building their leadership skills, whether they knew it or not. And as young people took control of different committees, we made sure that they were instructed in how to be good leaders. And so if we had a team dance, for example, in our theater space, and we had a group of teens, they were responsible for creating the rules. They did the signage. They decided and pricing for the condiments or the candy and the soft drinks that would be sold. They decided on the security protocols. That's leadership building. And it's just people, if you were trying to invite people to a leadership training academy, I don't know how many people would come. But if you invited teenagers to come to a team to operate a teen dance, it was a whole different thing, you know what I'm saying? And we did that over and over again. And so we built a lot of leaders up on Howard Street. And finally, we say arts and entertainment programs offer rich opportunities for economic development straight up because we live in the creative economy. And as I mentioned, that album was just one example. We made 500 copies and we had young people selling those 500 copies and they kept the money. So, I mean, we created money out of nothing, if you want to call it that. But more than that, we were modeling the behaviors and the skills needed to succeed in this economy. And RCA Black Music was very interested in that tape. And had People's Housing lived another year or two, I'm convinced we would have had a professional recording studio on Howard Street where young people would be learning state-of-the-art skills and then would have gone out and gotten $20 an hour jobs like that in the network of recording studios that we were in touch with. So that was just one example. We were talking about cable television, record producing, video production, and much more, you know, all coming out of the native interests and skills of our communities. And we were just there to plus it up. And I would just say, finally, that creativity is a big business in Chicago. You know, of the hundreds and hundreds of arts organizations, the direct economic activity in Chicago of cultural organizations is over $3 billion. Okay, and there's over 85,000 jobs supported by the arts in Illinois. So you position yourself in that space and you all of a sudden you're very attractive to not just arts funders, but people that are concerned with economic development, racial justice and equity in these crazy times, getting people literate for the 21st century, and much, much more. That's me, folks. That's me, Tom Tresser. You can always reach me at tom@tresser.com. That is the end of my presentation, and I will turn off. I'll first stop the sharing and stop the